much. And the next person is Bentley, who has his own reasons for hope. Can we get him on the screen?
Okay, my turn. So, everyone's been telling their presentation in the form of stories, so I guess I will too.
There he is. Can we see you, Bentley?
Hi.
There he is. Hey!
So anyway, like I was saying, about 3 years ago, I think it was about 3 years ago was the 2018 flood, and we had our power shut off, and there was no power being supplied to anyone's homes. And I remember we had a little solar panel, and it would charge a little LED light bulb. So at night, before we went to bed, so we could see, we would carry that LED light bulb around with us, so we didn't run into a wall. Now, 3 years later, we got a little bit bigger of a solar panel and a bigger battery bank. And we have a total of 4 batteries. And how this whole system works is that when the power runs from the solar panel, it'll come up back behind the board and go through these wires up to our charge controller. Then it comes back down, it goes into these batteries, and then from the batteries, this is where it gets really fun, we can run car chargers. And then, locking the view here, we can hook one of these up, then we get 2 more car chargers. Then we can hook, one of these up. And there's 2 USB outlets. Or we could plug one of these in that has 2 wall outlets. There we can also run cameras. We have a lot of cameras around. And then we still have that LED light bulb from 3 years ago that we used during the flood when we had power cut off. And on this part of the board right here, don't know if you can see it. Try not to get you 2 seconds. But right here, we once put up a camera. And then we also hooked up where is it? There it is. A wireless router. And we were watching the deer from our house that were down in our woods in live time. And we also have a microphone, so then we can also listen to the birds. What else do we have that I can show off? And my dad, he brought out an old radio that he used to have in his truck. And he was playing music. And we had a little TV. And he could watch movies off the sun. So there's a lot of stuff that we do with this solar setup.
Bentley, tell us how you got excited about all this.
Oh.
And what do you like? But only like 2 minutes.
Okay. So what I like about it and what made me interested in it was we are turning the sun, something that we've got for free for thousands of years, into something that is powering our homes and powering our cars and sometimes even powering bikes. Like, it's doing, like, we have a natural resource that no matter how much we use it, won't run out. And the best part of all that would have been that we're not harming the environment. That's what really makes me into solar panels and all the solar setups.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Bentley.
You're welcome.
Where is Bentley?
Here I am.
He's in Lafarge.
Bentley, where are you?
Lafarge.
Maybe say like where you are and how old you are and stuff.
Oh, I'm from Lafarge, and I'm 12 years old.
You rock, Bentley.
Thanks so much, Bentley.
Okay.
Okay.
So we're gonna now kind of dive into the purpose of our reason of being here today. As you can see, we have our motivations kind of coming from all different directions. When I met Bentley at the fair, he talked about the creativity of people when we come together. And I think it really hit a chord. It was like, that is what we're doing right now. We have a problem that we know is hindering all of our lives. And what can we do? Take matters into our own and take action into our own hands. And so that's really the idea behind the energy district. So these are kind of the staples as we came together as a group. These are the things that we, as a basis, believe in, and as an energy district. So we believe in hope through action. We're not just here to talk. We're here to think, plan, take action into our own mind, and own way. We believe in a free from carbon-based extractions and emissions. We believe in locally owned, produced energy generation. We're not just trying to just clean the grid up at a larger scale. We're talking, how can we take ownership and benefit our communities and use the energy locally, as well as own that energy, so we can actually keep it here in our communities. Bringing local energy consumers and providers together to shape and plan a better future. And electrification and decarbonization is the pathway. We'll talk a little bit more about that as we get going.
Leila, did you want to be sharing your screen again?
Oh.
Yes, please.
I tried to give you it. We might have to exchange host again because I may have a wrong setting. Can you?
Oh, looks like I got it.
Okay, cool.
Well, let's try this.
Maybe not.
Yeah.
Here we go. Okay. Awesome.
And so how are we doing this? This is a model that we actually have adopted from the energy districts in Iowa. And it's kind of incorporating all of these ideas of energy planning, public engagement, market transformation, advocacy, and readiness, resiliency. So we're bringing that all together to implement both the electrification and decarbonization, electrification of our transportation system, our heat, our cooking and power, and then to decarbonize the grid. For us, I mean, we're looking at right here in Vernon County, and that will look different than it would look elsewhere. It's really also reflecting the people that are here in the room that are coming together to think about this. So energy planning is such an important thing at the local level. So your input, your ideas, as well as our group here, is really the key to how this is going to function and work. So why is local ownership such a point we're making? We know that $76 million leaves our county every year in energy costs. Would you want to tell a little bit how that number was created?
So, sure. So that, that's not how much we spend on energy. That's how much leaves our county. You fill your gas tank, 85% of that money, boom, right out of Vernon County. 15% stays here. You pay your electric bill, around 60%, boom, leaves the area. So what's left is what stays here. That $76 million is what leaves. So look at the next thing. To me, that's huge. For a family of four, that's $10,000. That's what that equals in Vernon County.
Yeah, that's tremendous. And so with local ownership, we can keep that money here. And I mean, one of the focuses we have is that we have the benefit of the rural economy. We have beautiful land in the sun that we can harness right here. And we also have a vision that rural areas can really be the center of electric generation, that we could be the future of energy. And maybe that we're, instead of throwing $76 million out, we could actually make some money here and bring money into the county.
So why here? Why are we starting this pilot energy district here? Some of you are probably familiar with some of our history and a long tradition of self-determination over shared resources, namely soil and water in soil conservation districts, and then in electricity, a lot of the activity around the Rural Electrification Act started here in our area, and I'll show you that in just a minute. I guess this is the same thing. So the rural electric co-ops that we're familiar with, those were actually formed to serve the more remote locations and allow for direct member ownership, because the large cities were served by what we call investor-owned utilities. People would invest in them, but they didn't want to put out the money for so few meters and so much miles. So a bunch of farmers got together, and bankers, and I'm sure other grocery people and such, and said, we want to self-organize, and they pushed up the Rural Electrification Act, which provided loan money for them to build the infrastructure and then buy the generation together. So they were using their, and it's this one?
Yep.
Okay. Another reason why Vernon County is an awesome place is because we have a lot of land, and in the urban areas where they need a lot of electricity, they don't have the land to build it, and so we have an opportunity to provide that through a new economy that, like Kayla was saying, rather than exporting money, we actually have an opportunity in a few years to sell electricity out of our county and be a revenue generator, not just in like direct revenue, but in all sorts of other leases for landowners, jobs for people who live and here and raise families here. So we have that vision, even though it seems a little, but I kind of want to take us back for a moment. This is a fun thing that I found. This is actually on the Wisconsin Electric Co-op Association website. And this was the first film that was produced by the National Rural Electric Co-op Association and RECA, and it tells a story about how we were formed. It's 29 minutes long, so we're not going to watch it, but in case you want to watch it, it's kind of cool to see how we're coming back around to the beginning. But there's a part that I want to show you guys. I wonder if it's gonna, is the sound gonna go on too?
Yep.
Did you catch that? Even more. Maybe somebody knows these people. Are they gonna show it again?
Milking sure isn't what it used to be. Lights, fresh air, fast milking, even music. In fact, all farming has changed a lot. Why, millions of farmers.
Did you guys see where that's from?
Yeah, Wisconsin
And
FFA.
city folks
Westby.
can remember
Westby,
what life was like in the
Wisconsin.
good
Maybe
old
you'll see
days.
it now.
Well, let's go back to those good old days. Then,
Okay, now they're talking about before electricity, so we don't need to see that. But I thought it was really interesting that it's Westby, Wisconsin is where they filmed the very first National Rural Electric Co-op Association film. And then another part that is kind of, I probably won't be able to find it like this. If you do decide to watch it, it is pretty cool, like if you're at all into electricity. But there's a scene later on where the farmers are standing around and it looks like it could be today. I don't know where it is. Is it at the end?
This
Okay.
was filmed in what year?
1955.
So
It was debuted in
1955
1955. Yeah, in Westby and Vernon County. Yeah, it's crazy. It's like, okay, I'm not gonna make you guys watch this. Sorry. We'll go forward, but if in your own time, it is interesting to see because they're talking about the same sort of issues. Like they're talking about how without electricity, young people are leaving the area and moving to the cities, and how farmers are having trouble being able to compete with farmers that are in larger areas because they have electricity and these folks don't. So it's kind of feels like we're going full circle. You're determined, huh?
I am, but it's a really good scene because it actually is interesting because it's like people gathering together to take on the issue of not having electricity in their rural areas, right? And now we're back. Fast forward, this is 1940s, 1950s, or 1940s, 1930s. Fast forward to 2020, and here we are again, organized in a room, trying to come together and think about how we can clean our grid and make a transition. And so I thought it was really inspiring. We'll send this out to everyone who joins or put it on our
We'll
Facebook
put it on our
group.
webpage
Yeah.
when we
They'll
get one.
succeed. Sorry, we're not better techies and organizers with our videos, but yeah, it's definitely inspiring. So why now? Why now? I think most of us in this room know why you showed up tonight, so you have some sort of reason. I mean, we know that we're at the tipping point. No time is to waste. This is from the most recent IPCC. I don't need to explain it to you. Carbon emissions are out of control. We already have the technology as well. We know that solar and wind is the most feasible, and we have that to decarbonize. New infrastructure for storage and for smart technologies. It's kind of up and coming, but it's there. We can pilot it. We can start building it. We can write grants to get it into our schools and libraries and public buildings, businesses. There's a lot of opportunity there. Electrifying, or we need to be electrifying everything. We know when it's all said and done, we'll have, if we electrify it, that means that we'll have half the energy we're currently using. And we have the capacity right here in Vernon County. We were recently awarded Energy Innovation Grant from the Wisconsin Public Service Commission. So we have some funding to do some energy planning, which means that for us, we will be doing energy audits. We're still kind of working those out, what that'll look like, but we'll be connecting with around 300 members of our community, around 30 businesses, and then municipalities and organizations. And we're also working directly with some of our local municipal energy utilities, so Lafarge right now, to work with them to update their energy plan and to start thinking about what that might mean for them, especially out in the long run, if we can get community solar, if we can get these kind of other, if and when the legislation can change, what we can be ready for, and in this moment, what we can do to make that happen right now. So with that said, we will have some time. I know it's kind of all over the place and a lot of information. With that said, we're gonna pass it over to Andy to speak. He has way more of experience and knowledge, and so we will hear from him, and then we'll open it up for question and answer after. So welcome, Andy. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thanks for having me. This is a great gathering. I could just listen for another hour. Honestly, this is so much fun. You all are doing. I have some slides. I'm hesitant to use them, but I might just kind of turn them quickly. It would probably be more helpful and interesting for everyone to do a lot of discussion and Q&A. But would it work if I share screen? Is that an option?
Yep, that's an option, Andy.
Okay. Let me go ahead and see if I can get these up and get through.
There we are.
Yeah.
Okay, can you see that? Yeah. All right, so really super briefly, what's about me? I did grow up here locally on a dairy farm, Christmas trees. Went off and went to school as an ecologist, a natural resource manager, Peace Corps abroad. I think there may be someone else here involved in Peace Corps, maybe more in your room. And then I worked for a number of years, actually in Georgia, in the Southeast, with USDA as the Natural Resources Conservation Service. So very closely allied with soil and water districts, which is part of the story, of course. Came home with my wife and girls and family here, back to the home farm, at which my wife and I and family still do manage right now today. In addition to our other work, our off-farm work. Have 3 daughters. We still have Christmas trees. We don't dairy anymore, but we have small numbers of beef and sheep, all fully grass-fed. We raise our own forage, all that good stuff. We eat off the farm mainly. And then around that time, then 2007, when moving back here, there are actually already a lot of conversations happening in our community and elsewhere, have been going on for a long time. Many of you probably been part of these for decades, around clean energy, around renewables, around climate. The conversations here in the Winneshiek County and Decorah area were really starting to focus beyond just the individual institutions like Luther College and the city and whatnot towards a community-wide effort. And so we decided to start a group, an organization, but part of my contribution and some others was to say, look, we don't need a city as in Decorah or just community-based sustainability effort. Those are valuable, but we said we need something much more inclusive. And let's look at the county level. And so let's look at that kind of that soil and water conservation district model for local leadership and technical assistance. And that's how we ended up settling on the name Winneshiek Energy District. It's based on that soil and water district model, which I'll touch on in a couple minutes. And we said we're going to start basically as a nonprofit. That's the main option open to us. And we're going to really work towards leading, not just speaking about in public education, but actually implementing. So technical assistance, I'll talk about too, and owning and really promoting that ownership. This is a big piece of the puzzle because the third bullet here, the opportunity is huge for local investment ownership. Al talked about this. You all talked about it already. The wealth extraction that has been represented by our existing energy systems has been a real drain on rural communities in most of the country, not all of the country, of course. There are areas of fossil fuel, of high energy production and export, and those communities and places have their own real serious problems in the fossil fuel industry. But for most of us around Iowa and the Midwest, it's a wealth extraction industry. And so here we are back home in our community, and you're in your communities, and it's the same story everywhere. So if we could keep a large portion of those dollars local, in the process of the clean energy transition and stewarding our home place and our climate, that was our goal. The dual prosperity plus stewardship, green meets green, is kind of how we think about it. And you've touched on this already, the historical roots of soil and water districts and soil and water conservation, as well as the rural co-ops. They both go back to the New Deal, essentially. When the feds and the states actually worked hard together to create structures for local leadership. And we don't always necessarily think about it this way. We might think, okay, well, we needed power, and we created co-ops, or we needed terraces, so we created the Soil Conservation Service. But what they were really doing is they were creating structures for local leadership and ownership of the imperatives of the time. So that's essentially what we're looking at. We say, why not use that model to create a new structure for this local leadership in today's world of transitioning to clean energy? And so in that sense, energy districts are universal local institutions. That maybe sounds a bit jargony, but it seems to be a term that a lot of folks kind of grab onto as well. Certainly throughout rural America, we understand kind of what local institutions are all about. When you get into metro areas, it's a little different picture, and energy districts are starting to get into metro areas in Iowa. Dubuque for sure, and Iowa City, Johnson County, Lynn County, Cedar Rapids, and now forming in Polk County, Des Moines. Close to half the population of the state essentially is kind of in there. But how these energy districts function in metro areas is probably going to be a little different than in our rural county. So we'll kind of just stay focused on rural right now. And then, so this too, I'm just kind of zoom through a little bit, but would welcome questions as we go in terms of the functioning and the strategies. This flywheel, I love how you all put the arrow into the middle and said, this is our people. Our people drive the flywheel of these strategies for sure. And you can pursue various strategies depending on what the opportunities are and where the resources are coming from and where the talents are. One of the strategies that we have really focused on from day one, and some of this, I guess, comes from my background within USDA and providing technical assistance to farmers and other landowners on conservation, was we said we want to do technical assistance to energy users. Well, everyone's an energy user. Every home, farm, business, institution, organization, obviously. So, and everyone pretty much knows, even 10, 11 years ago when we were getting started, that there are real opportunities for saving energy, for energy efficiency especially. And then pretty early on in those early days, we were already working on solar site assessments, trying to get our contractors certified, all that kind of stuff. So we work the technical side. When you can put qualified boots on the ground, you really do gain respect pretty quickly as, if not the expert, certainly a valuable partner among many in your community. And then that really helps tremendously with your public engagement and education efforts. Market transformation kind of falls in the middle there. That's more of a partner to partner, institution to institution. We work closely with community college on certain kinds of trainings, with the financial institutions on policy updates and lending, things like that. So, and then there's advocacy, a whole nother, we could talk all night on that too. So I'd be happy to answer questions again. So this gets to the paradigm that you've all talked a little bit about, and this looks like it's core to your work already. This paradigm of, if we electrify everything and decarbonize electricity, we can deal with, that's how we can best address the climate crisis and decarbonize our energy systems, as well as try and keep some dollars local. But that piece of it, that keep the dollars local, is not, we need to recognize, in the big national paradigm of, say, the big greens and a lot of the national groups involved in the clean energy transition. For them, if the utility industry can electrify and can go fully renewable in the electricity, and then we can do this national electrification push, that's great, sort of end of story. And what we need to recognize here is a clean energy future, certainly a renewable energy electricity sector, now appears essentially inevitable. 10 years ago, certainly most people in the utility industry, they laughed at that. There were a few utility leaders who really recognized it back then. Most thought this was just sort of a fly they were going to swat and it was going to go away. It's amazing to think about that now, but we were working on it then, and that's the way it was treated. Now it's pretty clear all utilities in the country are they're just trying to figure, well, how fast, what's the timeline, how are we going to make sure we keep our profits and our rate bases and everything going and view this as a growth industry. So the electric industry is certainly going clean. How much of the economy goes electric? That's a different question. But big questions in that going clean and electrification process, of course, you can say, well, it's going to go green, and that's the end of the story. Okay, then we're all done. But then you can say, who's going to own it? And that goes right back to the wealth extraction model we're talking about. The other half of this, well, if it's going to go green, why do we all care, is pace. And certainly what we've shown here in Winneshiek County in northeastern Iowa is we're accelerating things, not just a little bit, but 2x to 10x. And so, yes, all these federal policies and state policies that are encouraging going clean in the energy sector, it's really amazing to think about. But if to the degree to which we can work in our own communities and spread this kind of movement around, we can accelerate that pace dramatically. And every decade is going to matter and could be the difference, as many of us know, in terms of tipping points and climate and all these issues. So electrify everything, yes, decarbonize electricity, but also that local ownership, and do it in a manner that promotes justice and doesn't push us in the other direction and create worsening conditions of both inequality and wealth extraction. So that's my little soapbox on that piece. Hope folks don't mind it too much. These are just a few numbers for Winneshiek County. Again, I want to move on and get to some discussion and Q&A. But the numbers we have documented just for this one rural county, which is smaller in population than Vernon County, are really significant already. And again, you get we're doing this work, and you build a lot of local credibility, and that also that those relationships can kind of steamroll, and that flywheel of relationship building. So I'm going to stop my share and certainly open it up. Be happy to talk now and answer questions, not just me maybe, but also the others involved in the Vernon Energy District, and we can just have some conversation. Al, you there? Kayla?
Yep, we're here. Okay, looks like Andy here's got a question.
So, Andy, if you were going to point somebody to,
Uh-oh.
can you still hear me?
I can.
We can hear you.
I did.
Oh, you're back.
Virtual meeting.
Look,
Wait,
Go ahead, speak.
there we go.
Andy, you there?
I am. Can you hear me?
Oh, fantastic.
Okay.
If you were going to provide some guidance to the individual, should they electrify their home or their transportation first?
Yeah, good question. And some of these issues, there aren't clear cut. It can be really specific actually to the household, the business, the person. And on this note, so I'm going to have a two-part answer here. One, the real general answer is we often get into these conversations locally too about, well, you're pushing, you say we're going to have fully electrified, but what are you going to do about storage? And it costs, 10x right now, and yada, yada, yada. And our first answer to many of those bigger questions is we have all the pieces we need to start now. We just don't have all the pieces we'll have in 10 and 20 years to finish this process. So that's really important. And it's a little bit of an aside, but even just 8 years ago, the utilities were all still saying, oh my gosh, if any piece of a grid gets over about 15 or 20% renewables, it's all going to crash. We're all going to crash and burn. So at first they weren't going in that direction. Then they said, okay, we'll do a little renewables and not much. And yet those narratives, I'm not saying this to knock the utilities, but the narratives around how the clean energy transition can happen and what technologies are available or not has been changing so fast, and it's always changing and erring towards, oh yeah, we actually can do that. So just coming right back to your question though. So personally, on the electrification angle, the two biggies in terms of shifting economic use, energy use into electric, the two biggies are cars, right? Passenger vehicles, transportation, and buildings, meaning mainly the heating needs of buildings. So, cooling and much other energy use in buildings is already electric, but heating needs of buildings is a really big one. So in that sense, we're talking heat pumps. In transportation, we're talking EVs, generally speaking. So EVs versus heat pumps, the EVs are more there now than the heat pumps are there now. with the caveat that, for example, mini splits, ductless mini splits are highly efficient and something that you could jump on right now and be saving energy with tomorrow. But for example, just homes, those technologies vary. Our main technical guy, energy auditor, energy planner, addresses these questions with homeowners all the time, and it depends on where they're starting. If you're starting, say, with an all-electric home that is literally just resistance heat, then going to heat pumps is a no-brainer. You're going to save automatically, and then your existing resistant heat is your backup. The challenge with heat pumps, say, for whole house ducted central systems is their efficiency level, of course, goes down. Heat pumps go down. Everyone probably recognizes this as temperature goes down. At this point, they're not functional in a high efficiency mode below somewhere between 0 and 15 below. And that figure keeps pushing down and down and down. So you can potentially get by with a heat pump now for 80% of your winter heating needs. But what you're going to do for the last 20, you still have to have a system there. So that depends on the starting point of a home. What kind of system do you have? Can it continue to function as your backup effectively while you incorporate heat pumps? Those situations are changing by the year as the efficiency of the heat pumps, both ductless and ducted, change. Not a perfect answer maybe, but conditional.
Alicia,
What has their experience been in working with utilities, the local utilities?
so I don't know if you could hear Andy, that Alicia asked, what has your experience been in working with the local utilities?
Well, good question. And it's not always easy. And I will say, parsing right up front, we've worked a lot closer with our rural electric co-ops than with the investor-owned utilities. We've just had better relationships with the electric co-ops. That doesn't mean we always agree on everything. We've worked hard, for example, over the years to keep the door open with the local utilities on distributed generation and customer-owned solar. So far, that door has remained open here in our Northeast Iowa co-ops. We don't have municipal utilities, any municipal electric in Winneshiek County. There are in some other communities around Northeast Iowa, and so we've worked some with those and some through the new energy districts who are working with their partner munis. Consumer-owned utilities should be tremendous partners in all of this. And really, in most cases, I think they will be partners, but there's always been some suspicion in the electric utility industry among any outsiders, and especially, unfortunately, on the clean energy side. Now that's changing, but still, when you're in an industry, it's just change comes slowly, and you're still in that world of communications and everything else. But the consumer-owned utilities are natural partners, and I would just encourage everyone to try really hard to work with them and to build relationships. The investor-owned utilities, in some ways, and sometimes we do partner. For example, electric vehicles. We've held events, they're still there. In our case, our investor-owned is Alliant Energy. And in those areas, we do work together. Unfortunately, we've also been at loggerheads quite a bit, especially around, for example, distributed generation. The investor-owned utility world sees distributed generation, locally owned solar, as somewhat of an existential threat. And I don't blame them. Their business model, it is somewhat of a threat, because the business model of investor-owned utility is built around rate-basing generation assets and distribution assets. Rate basing means they need to spend a lot of money on capital for generation or distribution, and then they get a guaranteed return through rates, guaranteed by state regulators on that investment. Well, the more we own our own generation assets, the less rate basing there will be in the future for investor-owned utilities. Well, nobody ever guaranteed investor-owned utilities, infinitely growing profits. They just didn't. But they're large corporations and they're very powerful. And so, yeah, we have been at loggerheads some. We actually have been participating in dockets, submitting testimony and commentary in active dockets at the Iowa Utilities Board, our regulatory body, your PSC. Since actually about 2012 and 13, we didn't realize we would be doing that early on. And then pretty quickly we recognized, you know what, there's some really key issues at the state level that are either going to help or hinder what we're trying to do just right here locally in Winneshiek County. So we had to have a voice. And increasingly we've had that voice, we think, matter quite a bit. I'm not suggesting you guys go ahead and do that and jump in right away to that policy arena, but potentially, you know, build relationships with the groups around Wisconsin that are active in the clean energy policy front. And you can have an influence. Our utility board was just up here for a rate hearing on our natural gas rate case a couple of weeks ago, and actually reached out to us at the Energy District and said, can we have a sit down? We just want to hear what's going on in the community. So, you know, and we did. We had quite a long conversation actually, and it was very beneficial and interesting all around. And you can, so again, that's about relationship building. Whether you want to get involved in policy right away is, you know, is all up to you all. So.
Willingness to support you or get in your way and have you come to the point of addressing that at all as an organization. Am I clear at all?
I'm not catching
the question.
So the question was how would your relationship be with the state government, and how were they working with you or getting, you know, plotting your progress?
And have you decided to address it?
And how have you addressed it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a good question. There too, we've really worked closely with partners. We've had thankfully, a pretty good coalition of clean energy groups in Iowa that talk fairly regularly. There's a networking group called REAMP that you also have in Wisconsin. It's kind of Midwest wide, and there are state level tables, they call them, organizing units. And so we actually were part of the original steering committee for REAMP in Iowa back in the old days, 10 years ago. But that state level group essentially engages in policy, and we're often part of it. And increasingly the whole energy district network can contribute pretty effectively to policy because it's a growing network in Iowa. But that's not, again, most of our time. You know, we do engage in policy because it's important, but we also really try and avoid just becoming policy advocacy organizations, because we really want to keep a focus on local work as well, on doing the public engagement, the boots on the ground. In terms of how it's worked, we've had both successes and failures, but one of the successes, just for example, this distributed generation question, many of you are aware of issues like net metering. Net metering was open in Iowa by definition for a long time, until about 2014-15, the investor-owned utilities, Alliant Mid-American, essentially brought a docket to the utility boards that tried to make the case it's time to end that. It's not the right policy. And the coalition was fairly strong. We were one of 3 or 4 organizations to really jump in and be super active in the docket. We won that docket at the utility board essentially, and then they took it to the legislature. Well, this was, Iowa at that time already had, this was in 18 at that point. It took many years. And they thought the utilities thought they had a clean ride, and they didn't. And part of that is because, importantly, this is not just a lesson about engaging at the state house, so to speak, but we and other groups around the state had been working really hard on engaging local leadership. So when we do local engagement, we also really try and work with, say, the city, the community, elected officials, the county supervisors. We hold tours for them, you know, and we go out and visit a site or two, maybe visit a farm, do something else. We took recently some local leadership actually down to the county to the south of us, to a town called West Union, which has 13 local government-owned school and city solar arrays, more than Decorah right here. So we're like, come on, folks, you know, we're supposed to be the leaders here in Decorah, but you know, they're out ahead of us a little bit. So a lot of our actually a lot of our state representatives and senators had been on those tours over the prior 3-4 years. And many of our state elected officials from both parties own solar. So that laid the groundwork for a really big win in the state legislature in 2019 or 20. Now I'm even mixing these years up, but where the legislature, the utility board had essentially said net metering shall continue in Iowa. The utilities tried to get the legislature just to overturn that with a bill that would have done all kinds of crazy things, including implement demand fees and high fixed charges and all this kind of stuff. And the legislature not only didn't go down that road, but again, this is a fully Republican legislature at that time and state administration, actually twisted it backwards and adopted the language of the Clean Energy Group's coalition and enshrine net metering in state law for at least 7 more years. And then we'll do a value of solar calculation methodology after that. Well, we hope that lasts, but we'll see. So it runs both ways. We've also had losses. And again, I think my advice there is to, certainly as an organization, as an energy district, build relationships again with your partners in in Wisconsin, and sort of that can help you start learning the ropes, and then be a conduit, even if the organization maybe isn't going to engage sort of directly in, say, a regulatory docket or something like that. You can still be a really good conduit to membership. And you can just put out a pretty good newsletter once a month, or even just quarterly, get information out so that your local citizens can speak up and be active with their representatives. And that's actually something that we have found really effective. And whenever we ask our membership, what do you want us to do more of? We hear a lot about policy because of course that interests people, but a lot of our questions about policy are, help me be a more informed citizen so I can talk to my whoever it may be. So we try and write articles like that in our newsletter pretty regularly about what's happening. So our membership can actually understand things, and they can be their own advocates as well. So.
Kent, you had a question.
What about weatherizing buildings so that they can use the technology efficiently?
Okay, so the question is, what about weatherizing buildings so that they can use the technology efficiently?
Great question. Yes. And solar is sexy. There's no doubt about it, right? So, and we've seen this since, well, we've been, like I say, doing solar site assessments and really driving the market here since about 2013, I would say, really seriously. So a long time. By 2015, we had 4 local installers, really good ones already working. And so that flywheel has really been building. But we started, when we first started, our very first our first grants, and almost all our work was energy efficiency focused. That's been, a key goal all along. It's never been as sexy as solar. But the technical assistance work that we do, so we as an organization, and most of the energy districts certainly, don't actually go and do the weatherization any more than we go and install solar panels. But again, when we can do good technical assistance, it's holistic, it's quality analysis and diagnostics, it's putting pencil to paper or the computer keyboard doing the financial analysis, so those businesses or homes or farms really have a good understanding of what can be done, where the incentives are. And then as necessary, we try and keep nudging them and, make a plan and push them on down that road. So the weatherization, the efficiency in general in buildings is really efficient. And I will be honest, it's hard. It's not simple. I mean, when you can look at DOE reports and RMI, Rocky Mountain Institute reports, and McKinsey reports, and on over the decades, they all say we have these trillions of dollars of efficiency potential. And most of the folks doing those reports have never actually tried to run an energy audit and get a customer to do something. It's not that customers are resistant, it's that all of us, these buildings are complicated. All of us in our house, we might be able to get a good audit that says, well, do X, Y, and Z and replace your furnace and then do your shell and all this kind of stuff. And it all takes a whole lot more time and energy than people realize. Well, that probably, but the consultants don't. And so the opportunity is there. The incentives sometimes are there, but it's more of an uphill battle. And the building shells for weatherization, the building shells are the most challenging part in a lot of buildings, because it's just not a simple fix. You can't tear down walls and rebuild them, with the building being in use. So, and yet we still work on that. That's a fundamental to all the work we're doing all the time. We're doing a lot of farm energy auditing and small business auditing these days, and efficiency is always step one, and solar is always step two, and sometimes they do step two first because not necessarily because the payback is quicker, sometimes it is, but because it's a simpler piece to bite off. Oh, I'm going to install panels on top of the roof. I don't have to mess up my life at all, or you know, anything in the business, and I'm going to get the money back in 8 years. All right, I'll start that ball rolling tomorrow. But you know, renovating the whole shell of a building or all the guts of the building for your heating HVAC system, it's tougher, but it's really, really important.
Anybody else?
Anything didn't work well? Anything that we should,
What are the big landmines that you step on that we should avoid?
yeah.
Oh, good question. There may not be as many, maybe there now, but also because of just timing, and we're in a little bit different era. Well, we're not in a less divisive era, but we're a little further along maybe in climate awareness. We certainly have had trolls and naysayers in the community. I'm not sure that I can say, you know, anything specific about a landmine or how to avoid that, other than it's really important to build relationships with your local leadership and do your best not to just get sort of painted immediately as, say, another liberal green group or whatnot. I mean, I guess I'm a liberal and I like green groups, but I'm just saying we really have worked hard all along to present the energy district as a key sort of driver for that, what I term green meets green. You know, both prosperity and stewardship, they go together. And much of our language when we talk to the community has honestly been around the economic benefits. We haven't led, certainly over the years, at least most of the time, just with climate talk. We're all in it because we believe it, obviously, but we also want as much of the community together as possible around the issues that we're working on. And so, you know, the economics messages resonate more broadly. The climate messages resonate tremendously with half the population, right? Or whatever it may be. So that's certainly one piece of it. Another piece of it is the sort of staying power, the resilience. We talk a lot about community resilience and resilience for climate change, but organizations need some resilience, and some of that comes from sort of, well, I guess your self-care is a big thing these days. Self-care in organizations is important. And it's easy when some of you have had this experience, I'm sure, when you get involved in something and the resources run out, it's easy to get burnout. It's easy for boards of young organizations like energy districts, we're seeing this in Iowa here with some of the young ones, without much in the way of resources, to get frustrated pretty quickly. The money's not coming in. How do we do much without much money? And things just can kind of die and fizzle out right away. So, you know, there's no simple way to prevent that. Obviously, you all are fortunate. You've got some great leadership, as far as I can tell, and some resources coming in to get to work, which is super. And hopefully then you can build on that, continue to bring in the resources and continue to work, but try to set yourselves up as well so that you've got, you know, you can cycle people through. It's okay if someone says, I got to go off the board, you know, and you've got more people ready to step in, and it's okay if activity dies down because the grant left, you know, you don't have grant funding for a spell. I guess just try and plan for some stability, and it's okay when everything isn't working super smoothly, because we've already seen that both in our own energy district as well as others, that it's a challenge. And I will also just add to that really quickly. Certainly as the network has grown here in Iowa, it's been abundantly clear that we can't have energy districts in every county all scrambling in the same way for peanuts and the same grants, et cetera, over time. And the model of the soil and water conservation districts also does suggest, you know, the need for state and federal policy and support. Now, soil and water districts, for example, are still here, and a lot of them are still doing great work, and they're still supported by public dollars to a large degree, and that support is minuscule compared to most everything else, right, in state and federal government. So on the one hand, what kind of success might we anticipate by looking, sort of for funds to help energy districts in today's environment? On the other hand, well, compared to all the other money that's getting tossed out there, there might be some real opportunities. And we actually believe there are some real opportunities, and we're in the process, for example, of proposing an initiative to the Department of Energy right now. A lot of what happens in terms of federal funds is unknown right now because, as you know, reconciliation bills haven't passed yet. So when all that sorts out over the next year, we actually have some hope, and we are working, certainly have a lot of partners at the state and federal level, Midwestern and otherwise, starting to say, this is a model that needs support. These are the local implementers of all these goals that we have at the national level. So maybe, I'm not going to get ahead of ourselves there, but we're really trying hard, whether it's through that avenue or major foundations or others, to try and create some larger scale financial support that would not just be the Iowa network, any energy district that's up and running, and future ones hopefully would be able to tap into that. So, but yeah, kind of steward yourselves as you go as well. Take care of each other.
Anybody else?
I just had a question about human capital. So thinking about what kind of skill sets, talents, personnel, what kind of human capital should be cultivated to help make something like this work in a community like this?
So the question is, what kind of human capital, what kind of skill sets, what are the talents that people need to bring that to really make this thing take off?
Yeah, great question again. The diversity for sure. It does take passion and people committed to making it happen, and in it ideally for the long haul, not necessarily like a decade. I mean, you can have board members come and go, you can have active membership and supporters come and go. If you're able to find funds to help provide technical assistance, energy auditing, planning, those kinds of services, that's going to be an important piece of this. And so you're going to need to find qualified people, or even one. I mean, we've had one main technical person on staff for most of our 10 years. And then we've partnered with others, but we haven't had money to have a huge staff, obviously, of full-time employees. But finding good, one or more really good, qualified and technical people in the energy world who are also really excited about the model and the sort of the local leadership that you're working with, that's certainly important. In terms of just leadership sort of in the organization, on the board, it does take all kinds. It'd be great to have someone, for example, one or more people with grant writing experience. That can really be helpful, even if it's just something very background and you work on when you've got time. But there are a lot of opportunities out there, more opportunities out there than any one person or group can actually be pursuing at once. So to kind of have that keep going, there's definitely be helpful to have folks involved from different sectors. I mean, we've never tried to say, oh, we're going to have a farmer and a banker and a yada yada, and but thinking about that and trying to have a diversity of people. We have had a local banker actually who has been involved since early on day one, and that's been really, really, really helpful, really valuable, both with some financial support, but also just as that community connection again. So, think about what kind of institutions around the community are respected and are leaders, and think about what people can bring to it. Membership and fundraising is certainly a big one, but it's definitely not the only one. We've had all kinds of people on our board coming. We had a representative from a local radio station, actual radio, part of the family of owners for the radio station. That was great. She talked it up on the radio station and gave us some airtime, and wasn't on the board a long time. But so building those relationships is important. But people believing in the model, understanding that this work takes time, believing in localism and the whole, everything that surrounds that can make it work. And there's no one formula.
Anybody else?
Mm-hmm.
Chris.
Chris Clemens from Renewable, Wisconsin. Al, maybe this is a question you can answer. Let's look down the road. The objective is here to produce all the energy we need in Vernon County to supply our needs plus more, how many acres of land do we need to put in all the solar panels we need to electrify this county? If that's the goal, what do we need?
What do we need? So,
Yeah, I'm done with this gentleman. I think we need local conversations.
So- yeah, okay.
We can let Andy go. We'll let
So-
you go back to your life.
Thanks, Andy.
So,
I didn't
so-
quite catch.
So the
Was part of the question around land?
yeah, so the question was like, so we get all our electricity and generate all our needs in Vernon County. How many acres do we need?
Yeah. And I can't give you that specific answer. I understand you guys have probably some better answers, but I think just as a last, maybe then toss in a comment here. It's a really good question because it's actually increasingly a national issue. It's an Iowa issue. And we're seeing a lot actually of sort of wrenches thrown into the clean energy conversation nationally. Some of them well-meaning by academics and others, and some of them actually driven by fossil fuel dollars. Sort of trying to say, none of this can ever work. It would take more land than we have in the country to power us and some of these kinds of things. And so I wanted to address that really briefly because we've addressed this actually some here with our local policymakers and we're trying to do more. And just as an example here, again, these aren't Vernon County numbers, but they are representative. Iowa has about 27 million acres of cropland that we plant annual crops to. About half of that, actually about 13 million acres every year, is corn. So in Iowa, on average, 13 million acres is planted of corn every year. About 60%, well over half of all of our corn acres goes to energy. It's an energy crop. It goes into the ethanol plants. And yes, there are byproducts, I get that, but the principal destination of 7 to 8 million acres of Iowa corn is ethanol. So it's a fuel crop. So we're talking about, well, what would it take to power Iowa, our electricity plus our transportation plus buildings maybe on renewable energy? Well, we have about 10 gigawatts of wind power already in Iowa. That's providing roughly half of our electricity, give or take. It's more than half of our electricity actually in the state. To produce a similar amount of solar in Iowa would take about a less than 0.5% of just those millions of acres in Iowa going to ethanol plants. So that's not of all the corn acres, and it's way less even, a smaller fraction of all of our total cropland. So it's the answer is for all of America that has land, basically, and I don't advocate cutting down forests to put solar panels up or putting solar panels on sensitive lands or covering prairies, but we have so much cropland. Less than 1% of the cropland in most of the US would be way more power than we need. That's kind of the simple answer. Now that, interestingly though, is still a lot of land. Let's say in Iowa, we may have 100,000 acres of solar panels 10 years from now or 15 years from now. People are going to have to get used to seeing fields and fields, sometimes as far as the eye can see, of solar panels. And that is going to be shocking. But when I was a kid, we didn't have thousands of acres of continuous corn in Iowa either. People had to get used to that. The impacts of growing corn over thousands of acres are orders of magnitude higher and worse for the environment, not just the climate, than those similar acres, a few thousand in every county, covered with solar panels. So I just wanted to kind of address that. It will take land. It will be shocking to some people, but let's all help our neighbors and our communities keep this in perspective. Producing renewable energy, solar and wind on our landscapes is a hell of a lot more productive than producing ethanol. And it's certainly a hell of a lot more prosperity inducing than importing essentially coal or oil in whatever form of energy we want to use. So I just hope that helps a little bit.
Thank you.
Thanks,
But
Andy.
also to answer your question, Chris, that's part of what we're doing this year and why we want all of us involved in the energy district, because it's going to take, we're going to have to go out and get the data that we don't have from all of the different stakeholders and try to figure out what would it take. We would love to end up with the end of the year and say, okay, we've got a range of ideas. If we wanted to electrify everything in Vernon County, this is how many acres of solar, this is how much it would cost. This is how much the return on the investment would be to us if we own here. Those sort of, that's what our pilot program planning grant is about. Those are great questions. Cal?
Who are the utilities you have in Vernon County?
We have 8 utilities in Vernon County. So we have Richland Electric Co-op is a little bit, Scenic Rivers Co-op is a little bit, Vernon Electric Co-op is huge. Most of it. We have Xcel Energy in Viroqua and down a corridor into Coon Valley. And then we have half of Viola, isn't half of Viola? Half of Viola Muni, Westby Muni, Lafarge. Yeah, that's it. So we have every flavor.
How are you liquid?
You know, we're just sort of beginning the conversation. Vernon Electric is the ones that we've had the most conversations with. They came to our initial conversations, and we did have a lot of agreement, especially around controlling peak demand and that very expensive power, you know, at the top of the curve, and how our energy district and producing power in here and reducing the amount of power and changing the way that we use power could help bring that peak down, which would save costs for everyone. But then it kind of like Andy alluded to, that's all great until we get to the we want to own it idea. And then it gets a little, I'm not so sure that's going to work kind of thing. So I think that we do have a lot of common goals. And the Lafarge, I guess, is another, Lafarge Muni, they've been having some good conversations about community solar, community-wide solar, and that is the village board. So Sam Oskowski, who's on the board, already has quite a few great relationships there and has been working a long time to help people understand how that would impact. And so that municipality is further along than any of the others, I would say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one of the other things we're doing with Lafarge, not only talking about community solar, there was a 25 by 25 plan created for many of the municipalities in our region. Quite a few of them were in Vernon County. Viola, Lafarge, City of Viroqua participated in that. But we've begun the conversation with Lafarge, starting to gather the data to update that plan. That was made in 2010. A lot's changed in the last 11 years. So the idea is that let's look at that plan, collect the current data, and help them form the next step in that plan.
Yes?
One leverage you might want to consider is the dairy land closing. The revenue that Vernon County got was about $78,000 a month. So to put revenue back into our county, this would be another source of it. And you might want to think about replace that revenue that we've lost.
That's a really
That's
great
a
point.
great-
Are you,
I'm on the county board.
you're Mary, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Do you want to just say who you are?
Mary Henry, county board supervisor, section here in town, District 17.
Thank you for coming. That's a great point. $78,000 a month that we're going to be losing when they close the Genoa coal plant.
It's gonna get, there's some phasing, but that
Okay.
it's a substantial. And there's also that land.
Right, exactly.
That's the other thing, I think just because river carries wind in that valley, that maybe that would be a source for wind.
Part of the other big key with that land is because that plant was right there, the substation and the transmission lines are right there as well. So that is an incredibly valuable location as far as energy goes.
It is. And to replace it with something of this magnitude might be a
You bet.
Well, it's getting close to 8.
Yeah.
Shall you wrap it?
Yeah, any final questions?
For you in general or for him, or is he gone? Because it's like time to have a local conversation.
Sure. Over.
We so we have a few minutes.
I'd
But
like to hear what your organizational structure is and how you expect to go forward to include us in that organization.
that's a perfect question,
Thank you.
Robert.
Yeah. No,
So-
yeah.
Do you want to repeat the question and then address it?
Yeah, so the question is, what's our organizational structure and how do we intend to include everybody here to help us move forward? So the Vernon County Energy District became an official organization on Earth Day of last year, which actually coincided with the 50th anniversary of Earth Day. We have been formed as a nonprofit, so we are through the IRS, any contributions are tax deductible. So we are a qualified nonprofit organization. I guess probably part of the next thing, we did apply for this grant, and this grant, the purpose of this grant is to create a comprehensive energy plan for Vernon County. So basically, to come up with a plan to do everything we just talked about. Where we can really use the help, right now is, we need to get a more clear picture of energy use in Vernon County. I've got a pretty, a broad idea based on information from the federal government that I could glean online of what our energy use in Vernon County is and the energy types that we use. But we really need some more specific information to help us go, okay, what do individual homes use in Vernon County? How many vehicles can we switch to electric? How many homes can actually be heated, like Andy said, by replacing heat pumps? So we need to really start doing some of these energy assessments that we're planning on scheduling those in January. Not obviously we can't get to 300 homes and do a complete energy assessment in 300 homes. So a lot of this will be, surveys, sharing, information on energy bills. So that's where we can really use help right now, is helping us gather the data so that we can create an accurate and realistic energy plan to move us from where we are now to where we want to be. Is that it?
So how do people get involved to help you?
That's a great question.
So yeah,
We're not totally sure quite yet.
You'll let us know?
yeah.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, so
How?
right now we're kind of putting together working groups. If you have extra time and you want to be more active and involved, we're kind of putting clusters of people together. We have one working on education. Andy here, I don't know if he's
right
here.
Yep.
He's going to talk to students at Westby next in a few weeks. So we're trying to kind of parcel out. So if you have a certain area, you are a grant writer, or certain areas that you're interested. Right now, we're kind of broken up into 4. We're not married to those areas, but this is what we're thinking. We have education. We have co-op member engagement. We have kind of the technical side. We're calling them energy geeks, but it's more just like thinking about this electrify, decarbonize, and how we can kind of communicate that to people and get people active and engaged in that. And then the 4th is working with our energy assessments. We're trying to kind of put that all together. We're figuring out what those energy assessments are. We want them to be holistic, fully, and so we need people to do pre-surveys, potentially go out and actually do the assessments. We're hiring for that, so there's a lot of work that needs to be done and thought around that. If you have any interest in that, definitely reach out directly to me, sign up, and just let us know if you're not already on our mailing list. Make sure you sign up. Even if you are on the mailing list, please just let us know you are here tonight. And then, reach out to me. This is my job, so I will happy to talk one-on-one with you, take any of your ideas or thoughts. because this is as rich as the community that's involved in it. So we're here right now, but we would love to have all y'all on board.
Yeah, one thing I'd like to reiterate is if you have any wordsmithing capability, or you're a grant writer, or you're a spreadsheet jockey, because in order to get all these energy numbers put together, we're going to need multiple spreadsheets, that kind of thing. So like Kayla said, it's everything from reaching out to the community to doing actually technical. And we do all our work on Google Docs, which is working very well. So no matter where you are, you tie into what we're doing.
Yeah.
Just, I would like to make sure that the numbers that I gave you are correct, and I did pull it up, that the county gets utility shares of a revenue of $150,000 to Vernon County for spent fuel. $596,000 is county share in revenue. Recreational use of the property in the future would go back on the tax roll. There is a land sale of 137 acres of land.
There is? They're just selling it to the public?
No, not necessarily. I'm telling you what's
Okay.
there.
Oh, so that would be
It
revenue.
was brought up, actually. I asked the question, what could that possibly be used for? And it was brought up that it could be for solar power or recreational, as been discussed.
Cool, thanks.
So that is in the July 21st board meeting.
Thank you. And I guess just to follow up on Robert's question, we'll be getting to the, like, between now, we literally just got started in August, and then we got ready for the fair, and we did the fair, and that was amazing. Like, we had so much interest, so much more than we thought. It was very inspiring. And then we worked on this by November 10th, which is the next one, when we're really hoping to have, it's about our energy ecology, our energy ecosystem. So we're going to be looking at Vernon County and Cal, kind of looking at that question, like, where does our energy come from, and how do we get involved as energy district folks in those decisions that are being made? How can we affect the decisions? By then, I hope we have a little bit more. I mean, we can always, yes, thank you, Amy. We can always communicate by email, but by then we should have more defined how can you get involved roles.
I'd like to say, invite your county supervisor to the next meeting.
And thank you for-
Mine is here, and that's Mary
Oh,
Hendricks.
you did?
Yeah.
And Amy said we need to go, so, but.
Thank
Okay,
you so
thank you
much.
all for coming so much.
Yes,
Thank you very
so
much.
much.
We want to learn from you, and even though we're not from Vernon County, I think the model of what you're trying to do here, we can kind of try to do this in every county in the state.
That's the idea.
We're all facing exactly what you're facing. I think
Thanks,